Good afternoon and welcome to Bakersfield College's Peace Institute Seminar Series. The series is tied to the Bakersfield College Peace Garden Project. My name is Norma Rojas Mora, and I am the Director of Communications and Community Relations at Bakersfield College. Before we get started on this important conversation, I want to share a few reminders. Please be sure to be active in the chat. We encourage you to share your thoughts, ideas, or questions for our speakers. The hashtag for this series is hashtag BC Builds Bridges. Please share your messages and inspiration from today's virtual seminar via the chat and on social media using the hashtag BC Builds Bridges. Please remember to stay active in the chat, and let's get things started. As we kick off this seminar, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce the president of Bakersfield College, Dr. Sonia Christian, who will be setting the context for today's conversation. President Christian.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Today, March 30th, 2021, I'm happy to unveil the Bakersfield College Peace Initiative, which brings together under one umbrella several projects that we've been working on for the last, I think, about 2 to 3 years. The idea of creating an environment to inspire goodwill began specifically in 2020 when Dr. Naina Patel approached me about developing a peace garden on our campus. The Peace Gardens, plural, concept has now evolved into a plan for 2 spaces, the Learning Garden and another garden inspired by Gandhi's life and ideas. Stacy Shepard's article on BC's Peace Gardens got a lot of community interest, including that of Mike Henstra, a Rotarian, who is very committed to Rotary's focus on peace building and conflict resolution. BC, under the leadership of Cheryl Scott, is now partnering with the Rotary clubs to advance our peace building efforts here in Kern County. So March is Women's History Month, and what better way to launch the Peace Initiative than to have women, young mothers, reflect on the importance of building a better world for their children. Mahatma Gandhi himself said, "If there is to be peace in the world, then we must begin with the children." So it is a particular pleasure for me to welcome you all to the first installment of our Peace Seminar series, coinciding with our last seminar of Women's History Month. Mothers for Peace, in fact, Young Mothers for Peace. And I'm so happy that Norma Rojas Mora pulled this program together. It is in the family that children develop their values. They are introduced to community life where they learn how to deal with conflict, to resolve conflict, not through verbal or physical violence, but to resolve conflict through dialogue and development of understanding and goodwill. Permitting our children to grow up in an environment that has a panoramic view of the beauty of our differences, while clearly seeing the commonality of our dreams, the commonalities of our purpose, enables them to soar to their full potential and lifting our whole community with them. Maggie Barankitsky, a human rights activist working to improve the welfare of children, said it best. "It is a joy to expand this great human family. Motherhood is a mission weaved with years of toil and ongoing studies at the School of Life. This is perhaps why mothers should be called to serve beyond the immediate environment of their families. If we want to build new peace-loving generation capable of renunciation in this world of conflicts, the role of mothers is vital." For us to recognize the crucial role of mothers is an act of inclusion, not exclusion. You do not have to be a biological mother in order to participate in raising a new generation committed to peace. We also call upon our fathers, grandparents. I see many of the partners of our participants today on our list of attendees. So we call on all of you to mother our communities, many of whom are wounded, back to health, not just to survive, but to thrive. The nurturing role that mothers bring to raising children and creating families is one that we all have the capacity to cultivate. We can all recognize and support regardless of gender or societal role. If mothers were to lock arms and work their magic, this world would look very different. I can't wait for you to hear from our 4 young women, young mothers, beautiful, talented. So at this point, I'll turn it back to Norma.
Thank you, Sonia, for your touching remarks. They really hit home. And it is through peace that we've seen significant change happen throughout history. Often getting to the place of peace means acknowledging places of hurt. I know firsthand that our community has experienced hurt, but through it, there is also hope. The women on today's panel make me feel great hope in what we can collectively accomplish. It gives me great pleasure to introduce today's speakers and prominent community leaders. They also have one of the most important jobs, if not the most important job, and that is being mothers. Given the current climate, it is wonderful for them to answer the call as BC builds bridges. You will be hearing from Sandy Wu Cater, an anti-trafficking expert, Lauren Skidmore, the district director for Assemblyman Vince Fong, Pavan Gill, the Director of Human Resources and Community Development at the City of Arden, and Antoinette Carr, Human Resources Manager at Amazon. Let's get started. So the first question I have for our panelists is, can you please introduce yourselves and your children or families? We're going to start with Sandy.
Thank you, Norma. Thank you so much for that warm welcome. Good afternoon, Renegades and fellow community members. I'm Sandy Wu Cater. I am a subject matter expert in human trafficking issues. I've been engaged in this work for about nearly 20 years now in various capacities. I have gone through the journey of, going through a PhD program, doing research on this issue, doing teaching and all of that, and then found myself on the front lines. I'm also identifying as a Chinese American woman. I am a wife to an amazing husband, and I'm also a new mother. I had my first child last year in 2020 during, the beginning of the pandemic. And I will say that our 10-month-old son has truly taught us that, time is a gift, and with every milestone that he accomplishes, I feel like I want to freeze time, and I want to, take the memories with me throughout my life and forever. So I feel so overwhelmed with the experience of love that I get to have. And I feel truly blessed to be a mother.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for being here, and I'm honored to be here to share with you all today a little bit about my motherhood journey. I was born and raised here in Kern County. I come from a long family line of cattle ranchers. We have deep roots in Kern County and have for 5 generations now. During the day, I work for Assemblymember Vince Fong, where I solve problems that our community is facing every day. I serve on the Kern County Planning Commission, Kern County Employee Retirement Association, and I'm also a new member of the Bakersfield College Foundation. Go Gates. I've spent my life giving back to others, and I give every day to my children. My husband, Ryan, and I have a son, Lane, who is 10 months old, and my daughter, who is 2, and those of you who have met her, 2 going on 14. She has a lot of personality and very independent. And I'm really blessed that I get to share some of my story with 3 other amazing women today, and all of them, which I get to call my mom friends. So I'm happy to pass it over to Pavan.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, BC and Dr. Christian, Norma, for letting me be a part of this conversation. My name is Pavan Gill. I'm the Director of Administrative Services for the City of Arvin. I overlook HR, risk management, and human resource. In the Community Development Department. I serve on the Bakersfield Sikh Women's Association and the Kern Economic Development Foundation Board. I'm a commissioner for the Human Relations Commission, and I am also another recent addition to the Bakersfield College Foundation Board, which I'm really excited about. But like many of the others have already said, my most important role is as a mother. My daughter Noor is 5.5, almost about to be 6, and she is truly the light of my life. And the day she was born, I feel like I myself had a rebirth of a sort. And suddenly life changed from being about me and the way that I saw the world to be very different. And suddenly I was looking at what's around me, our environment, our society in a much different way, because suddenly it was something that's going to be passed on to my daughter. So motherhood has just been an absolute amazing journey. And I really applaud BC for giving mothers the option to be able to come over here and talk about how we see the current climate through this very important lens. So thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm definitely honored to be a part of this panel. My name is Antoinette Carr, and I am an HR manager for Amazon here in Bakersfield that launched in September. Born and raised in Houston, Texas. When I first moved to Bakersfield, my plan was to be here for about 2 years was my max. Well, that was 6 years ago. Bakersfield definitely has a way of just making you feel at home. And I have an MBA with a concentration in ethics, and I also have a master's in marriage and family counseling. Been in HR for a long time. Worked my way, started at the front desk, working as an HR assistant about 17 years ago, and just worked my way up. I love the field, and like I said, been an HR manager for Amazon since June. Braxton is my 2-year-old. Whose two favorite words right now are mine and no mommy. I used to think my parents were just, before having him, I used to think my parents were just overprotective and just these, 2 aliens. But now that I have Braxton, I've become that way, and I just understand the depths of your love that you have for another person, and just makes you just want to be better, Again, honored to be a part of this panel and excited to dive into the dialogue.
Great. Thank you so much to all of you especially for sharing those touching family photos. That was really great. As President Christian mentioned in her comments, we have seen a barrage of different negative actions that have given us pause and so much information. So much has happened since the pandemic, and there's a constant influx of information about what is happening in the world. The second question I have for all four of you is, as a mother, what do you see as a threat? What is the threat? And we'll go ahead and get started with you, Antoinette.
Yeah, so, as I mentioned in my introduction, my son is 2 years old, and the things that we're teaching him right now and kind of modeling for him are, topics such as, sharing is caring and be nice to your friends. His granny came up with this saying that we literally say to him every morning before he goes to preschool, and it's no fighting, no biting. But basically, we're trying to teach him how to be a good person and how to be a caring friend. And, once he gets a little older, we will start teaching him how to love and embrace differences amongst his peer group. As a mom, one thing that breaks my heart, and although we will be teaching him how to love those that are different than him, at some point we're going to have that conversation with him that it may not always be reciprocated. And that I see is definitely one of a threat and just something that definitely gives me heartburn as a mom. And that, there may be people that treat him differently because of things that he can't control, like the color of his skin. It breaks my heart to think about his innocence and how much joy he has because of his ability to be able to see the world through rose-colored glasses. And I think there's beauty in that, and I want to protect that as much as I can. However, there definitely is going to come a time when he realizes the reality of our current climate. I vividly remember when I was about 6 or 7, I came home from school bawling one day because some kids that I consider friends called me Blackie, and they referred to me as being a skillet because of how dark my skin color is. And I remember not really being able to grasp the why of that. And I remember telling my parents, crying, those are my friends, those are my friends. And I remember my parents having to sit me down and have that really tough conversation with me. And the thought about having to have that same conversation with Braxton about the racial inequities, the lack of empathy that's shown, the intolerance of differences, the inability to be able to disagree, but yet remain in good standing with one another. Those are what I consider threats and things that definitely break my heart. I'll pass it over to Sandy.
Thank you, Antoinette. As a mother, I think, I see continued racism and xenophobia as both imminent threats. I think it's been really challenging, being a new mother, not only during a pandemic, but then also tied to that is this rise in violence against Asian Americans. And, like I had said previously, I identify as Chinese American. And that's been really difficult to watch and, be a new mother in this type of space. I've just seen regurgitations and recycling of old stereotypes that, we should be done away with, yet they are resurfacing at rapid pace. And we see all over the country since 2020, since the beginning of this pandemic, that people of Asian descent are being blamed for the virus. And we see acts of violence everywhere related to this. We saw last year, this family, this father with 2 sons shopping in Texas. And this person, thought in his mind that these people, because of what they look like, were the root cause of a virus. And so he physically attacked all 3 of them, including the young children. And we've seen cases like this throughout 2020 and now into 2021. And to be honest, I've lost track of all of the different instances because I can't continue to watch it. And there's a feeling of guilt there too when I say that, because I'm not experiencing the physical violence, and I shouldn't turn it off, because I should recognize that these things are happening, and I should be sharing and amplifying the voices of these victims and survivors. But I'm seeing this, and then I look at my son, and he's 10 months old with such innocence. And to know that he is growing up in his first year of life with all of this, it's really challenging. And I see those types of issues as threats. And I've shared with many friends that, I took a walk, just a normal walk around my own neighborhood with my son several months ago in the fall. And I just will never forget walking along in our own neighborhood as we pass by this house with this man outside. He's speaking on the phone. And as we pass, he suddenly talks very loudly. He is sharing with the other person on the other line, at the end of the line, this just very, and I won't repeat what was said, but just this very racist language, this rhetoric that's very hateful towards people of Chinese descent, and tying that to, again, COVID-19. And you can imagine as a mother, as I'm pushing my baby in his stroller, walking by this house, a house in our own neighborhood, and feeling this sense of frustration and sadness. And this is a neighborhood that my parents come and take my son on walks for. I'm just so tired of holding my breath and wondering, if I don't go with them, is something going to happen? So I think really racism and xenophobia are imminent threats to peace, to safety, to everyone's well-being. And with that, I'll pass it along to Pavan.
Thank you, Sandy. That was touching. And along those same lines, I think what's most heartbreaking to me is watching my daughter grow. And when she was a baby, I was able to control her environment, right? You keep them around family, you feed them only the foods that you're wanting to expose them to. You're able to create this controlled environment. And as she's gotten older, she's gone to school. She's learning more. Her language has developed exponentially. We watch the news, and she's understanding things that before, she could be playing with a Barbie dream house and it didn't mean anything. She looks at those same images and she hears those words now, and they suddenly have context and they have meaning. And I see this 5-year-old who is trying to understand all of the things that are happening. And, the last couple of years, I think for everyone, especially mothers, parents, have been extremely challenging. I think they're challenging as adults, let alone when you think about raising our children. And the biggest threat for me has been the polarization. I think there has been so much division and hatred, and it's racism, it is classism, you see it, sexism, you see it everywhere. And there's such a lack of empathy in this world that we're trying to raise our children in. And it just makes me think to, one of the nights when my husband and I are watching TV, and we always have something kind of going on in the background, and my daughter sees a BLM protest, and there's a protester and he's holding the sign with a picture of George Floyd. My daughter looks at me and she said, "Who is that?" She's 6 years old. I'm not ready for that conversation yet. I didn't think it was coming, and I didn't know what to say. And I just paused and I kind of said, tried to figure it out in my head. And then I just told her, I said, "That was someone's son." And it's a difficult conversation to have, but as she grows, as she learns how to navigate this world, those are things that, that are happening, and they're not just happening in our country. There are issues with globally. I'm sure you guys have seen, and if any of you guys are my Facebook friends, you've heard a lot about the farmers' protests in India. And that's something that just resonates very close to home. And when my daughter sees us, talking and listens to the conversations about that, I talk to her and she goes, well, why are they protesting? Why are they out there? And we're talking about people that for 4 months have left their homes, they've left their families, and they've been protesting because they're fighting for their livelihood. They're fighting for their right to be heard in a democratic state. They're fighting for their lifestyle. Farming is not just an occupation, especially in India. In India, it is a true way of life. And when you look at all this, it's to understand. And when she would hear, oh, so-and-so said this about it. And if me and my husband are talking about our disappointments in maybe a comment that was made, or, the response of the government, she just says, well, why don't they care? And I don't have an answer for her. And I think that is the biggest threat, which is all of the challenges we're facing and how, depending on what we label ourselves at, or where, what we align our belief structure with, that we're forgetting our humanity. So, thank you.
Pavan, I think you made a great point, and what I originally had thought was a great threat, actually, I think the greatest threat really is that we don't turn these obstacles into opportunities. If we don't look at what's happening in our world today and change them, and we have, I believe, especially the women that are on this panel, I know Antoinette, we take our kids to the park on a regular basis. So we really are breaking barriers that, our parents and our grandparents had walls built that we're breaking down. And I really think that the greatest threat for us as mothers right now is that we don't turn these examples and these educational lessons into opportunities for our children to grow and change. Fear and hatred is a real thing that we're dealing with. It's a real thing that we've been dealing with for a long time. But I think the greatest threat is that we don't do anything about it.
Thank you for that, Lauren. And, so let's fast forward to 2035. Your child is now an adult. As you envision that world, what do you want it to look like? And I'll start with you, Lauren.
I just hope my child ends up being successful. my 2-year-old is challenging me beyond all means right now. And I just picture, gosh, she could go anyway. But, I really do believe that our generation, and I know Dr. Christian mentioned it before, that we are young mothers. I really do believe that the way in which we are parenting is going to create a beautiful world in 2035. I think there's going to be some big walls that we need to break. I know for me, motherhood has broken down some walls as far as loving and kindness, and shown me how to let go of myself, let go of what I thought was important, and completely transform that. But it's also built bigger walls, right? It's made it harder for me to pursue my career, pursue some other passions. And I think 2035 is going to be a place where real conversations are not awkward anymore, where you can have a very open dialogue with a friend or a neighbor, and you can come out of it saying, we can agree to disagree, or I believe in what you're saying, and I'm going to discover why that's important for you, even though it might not be important for me. And so I think 2035 will be a great place for dialogue for our children. I really hope we can break down the barriers and the tension that we're feeling in the world today. But I think it'll be a great place.
Yeah, to kind of echo some of that, and think about what I want my son to, what kind of world I want him to be living in at that time. I would love for him and all people of color to just be seen and loved for who they are, and to no longer have to combat these old stereotypes just to survive, just to avoid a gunshot wound or avoid getting stabbed while you're walking on the street. I just saw another case in New York City just this past weekend where the 65-year-old woman was walking to church, and this man physically assaulted her, attacked her, and NYPD, thankfully, I think from what I read, apprehended him, and they are classifying this as an anti-Asian hate crime. I don't want that type of world for my son. I want him to just be able to live and be successful, like Lauren had talked about for her children, and to just be who he is and who he will become and be loved for that person that he decides to be. I think that would be an ideal world for my child and everyone else's child. And that to me means that society in that time would be just normalizing, embracing difference rather than fearing it. I don't think, when we're talking about racism, when we're talking about xenophobia, difference is not the problem. I think we actually need to lean into that and celebrate, as cliche as it sounds, celebrating diversity, right? And really embracing the fact that, yes, we all are different, but that's not the problem. That's not the issue. And I think with that, acknowledging that we're all different, I think we need to be proactive in being inclusive. And so in that ideal world, there's this active plan with everything that we do to strive for inclusion. I think that would be an amazing, peaceful world that I would want my son to thrive in.
So it's challenging for kids to be what they can't see. That's one of the reasons why representation matters. I don't know if anyone else has seen this, but some media outlets, I don't know, it was a couple of months ago, but they covered a story where this little girl who she had a disability and she was in Target. And as she and her mom were walking through Target, she saw this billboard or this picture she saw one of the displays, and of this little girl that appeared to have the same disability that she did. And her mother stopped, and her mother took a picture of her daughter gazing at that billboard. And in the article, the mom just talked about how emotional her daughter was after seeing that picture. That's just an example of how important representation is. And I was reading another article the other day, actually about Kern County considering to create a diversity director position that would primarily oversee the county's initiative of ensuring fair representation in the workplace. Those are moves in the right direction. And I would love to see and envision in 2035 that we would have more representation and that more communities and organizations would be making decisions to have that fair representation. I also want to see more forums like this. We're all different. We're politically different. We come from different backgrounds. We have different experiences. We work in different industries. But one thing that brings us all together, right, is the fact that we're mothers and the fact that we all want the absolute best for our little ones. So, intersectionality kind of addresses that. And it's about cultures coming together, genders coming together, women coming together for one common goal. I'll pass it to Bevan.
To piggyback off of that, I want to see a world where there's more equity, where every single one of our children can grow up and have the same opportunity, the same access. And this is not something that is unattainable or too hard to do. It's just a process. And I applaud BC, I applaud the county. I read about that position as well. And we're taking the right steps. We're doing the right things. This forum today is a great step because we're learning about the different perspectives. We are learning about each other. And the more we are exposed to different ideas, different cultures, the more we can embrace it, and where that diversity truly becomes a strength. So I'd love to see more equity, more empathy, which I think is one of the biggest reasons we have some of the issues that we have today, and more unity. And I don't mean that we think the same. I think it's beautiful. I love the diversity in thought, because it's truly the diversity in thought and the back and forth and where we end up finding in the middle. And sometimes that middle is where we need to be. Sometimes it's not. And I think it's that active, kind of going back and forth that truly makes us unique and makes us strong. And I want to see a place where children and who will then be the leaders can learn to meaningfully engage. The lack of discourse, the lack of being able to articulate our positions. I worry about my daughter growing up in this age of social media where, you don't have to articulate your thought. You just find a meme that you can repost and share, 20,000 times, and then that becomes fact. I just want to see a world where there are less of the barriers that we should actively be working to overcome. And then also just see where that takes us next. Because once you remove those and you remove some of the conversations that have to be had, we're also going to take a stab at that polarization, because suddenly we don't find ourselves on these opposing dichotomies of viewpoints. It would just go back to more being dynamic dialogue. And I think that's just another thing that I'm so thankful for BC, for this forum, for the Patel Foundation, for this initiative about giving us a place to be more self-reflective, where we can self-examine, because it really begins with us. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. So what do you do? What do you want to do to reach that vision for a peaceful society in 2035? What is your call to action? What is our call to action? And I want to start with you, Lauren.
Well, when we were preparing for today, I think Sandy and Antoinette shared a little bit, but one of the things I've been doing naturally since becoming a mom was supporting other mothers. It wasn't anything that I was doing intentionally. It was just something that I knew needed to happen, because the moment you have a baby enter this world, your life changes. And the most vulnerable moment of a woman's life is the day of birth. I mean, there is no ability to be prideful during that moment. You do not have any ego. All of that goes to the wayside when you are in the hospital room. And so on both the day that Antoinette and Sandy had their boys, I reached out to them, asking what they needed, supporting them, just wanting to be present in their lives. And I will tell you, I think to make change, we really need to continue to support other mothers. It might not be your best friend. It might not be somebody that you've had conversations with in depth about motherhood or life or politics or anything before, but I think just reaching out and sharing a hand with new moms, with a mom of another child, creating that coalition of support is so important. And I really think that once we as moms wrap our arms around one another, and we support moms, and we allow our children to feel supported and loved through motherhood, I think, that 2035 marker, the future that we envision for our children will come so much easier. I think women in the past have always kind of sucked it up, and we've had motherhood as just this next level of life. And I know my mom and my grandmother have both shared how difficult it was for them, but it wasn't a time or a place for them to ever vent or to share how difficult it was. You were just a mom. And with our generation, we're lucky enough, we have platforms to share the difficult moments. We have platforms to continue to be vulnerable, to let down our walls, to let down our prideful moments. And Antoinette can attest, we talk on a daily basis, but there is many texts and many video chats about, what am I doing wrong? How do I change this? Somebody help me, come get my kid. And I think moments like that really will create a more peaceful society, and just mothers helping mothers.
I think when we talk about change and how we get change, a lot of times we look to external. What would we do to change society? But I think change really starts with us. And then it starts with who we raise and how we raise them. And I think, my game plan with my daughter is to just expose her to as much as possible. I talked earlier a little bit about the polarization, the different labels that we give. And, I don't want to raise my child in the echo chamber of my beliefs. I don't want to raise a strong Sikh woman or a strong Democrat. What I want to raise is a good human being, someone who can look at the world, understand diversity, and she can figure out for her own where she stands and not be so consumed with labels and all of the other things. So that's something that in my life, I want to make sure that I make a priority for my daughter, and just teaching them to find passion, to find purpose, and pursue it. When it comes to some of the issues that I talked about before, whether it was the farmers' protest or the other things, I mean, she's 5.5, right? Some of these conversations are truly heavy, and they're too heavy. I wasn't ready for half of them, but they're here. And when you're a mother, it's not always the best timing. Things don't happen the way you plan. And what I do is navigate it the best I can and try to teach her and give her the tools that she can use to help figure out how things go. And I want to teach her to pursue passion, and I want to teach her to act. I don't want her to be passive. I want her to know that when we feel something strongly, even if it doesn't have to do with our own quote unquote community, it's not an issue that's only felt by Indians, but I want you to be able to be that voice for whoever it is, and to stand up and to act. So, thank you.
So I'll start with a story, a quick story. So Braxton and I were at a playground in town, and another mom was there with her kids, and we started casually kind of chatting about life and our professions and our family and how tired we were. And at one point in the conversation, she commented about how handsome Braxton was, and she then stated that he was going to be this, like, I could see him being this amazing football player when he grows up. And it gave me a little bit of pause when she said that, because I hadn't mentioned anything about sports. I mean, he's 2, right? So I didn't really understand the connection. And at first I thought, whatever, just move on, but I actually ended up kind of challenging her by simply just asking, oh, what makes you say that? And there was this long, awkward pause. And I initially wanted to fill the space, right? But I just changed the subject, let's move on and just go on. But I kind of sat there uncomfortably for a while until she provided a response. And we actually ended up having a really productive conversation. So my call to action for myself is to continue having conversations like that. When I hear implicit biases and when I hear gender or racial stereotypes, like, speak up about it. I want to challenge it. I want to, if I see something, I want to say something. And not in a disruptive way, not in a confrontational way, but in a productive way that actually moves the conversation and the agenda forward. Another thing that I'm committed to doing is just to make sure that Braxton is aware of some of the gender and racial stereotypes that are out there. For example, science and math are for the men, engineers are for the men, English and liberal arts are for the women. Growing up, I heard this all the time. And I remember this one specific instance where I made a C in math, and one of my teachers told me like, oh, it's okay, women really aren't good at math. So I remember like not really trying as hard moving forward because I felt I kind of had a free pass not to, until my parents, I brought home that second C and they weren't having it. So, that at that moment, I remember them having a conversation with me about like, no, math is not for men. Like you do good at everything that you put your mind to, and I know this is so cliche, but I want Braxton to be whatever his heart desires. And I'm committed to exposing him to as much as I can. Last thing, I'm an HR, I mentioned I'm an HR manager at Amazon. And, right now we're spearheading the formation of a lot of different affinity groups. And these groups bring employees together across like businesses, across locations around the world. And they play a huge role in building like internal networks and leading service projects. And it just gives the associates overall like a sense of acceptance and belonging. There are 11 affinity groups that Amazon has. And here at Bakersfield, since September, we've launched 4. So we've launched the BEN group, which is the Black Employee Network. We've launched Women in Amazon. We've launched Warriors at Amazon, which is for anyone that's in the military. And we've launched Latinos at Amazon. There's 7 more, and one of my call to actions is to make sure that we launch as many more as we can, so that every one of our associates feel welcome and that they feel represented.
So I think just from our conversation today, we can all agree that, empathy is really needed, and that is going to be a tool for us to build a peaceful society. And I think what I want to do is challenge all of us to put that into practice on a daily basis. And, it might look different for everybody in, how we practice empathy. But for myself, as a professional in the field that I'm in doing anti-trafficking work, we very much practice through almost everything that we do. We practice things through a trauma-informed lens. And I really want to invite everyone to really look into what that means and what ways we can utilize that in our daily life. So just understanding that every single one of us as human beings, we've all endured some sort of trauma. And, that experience of trauma may look different, but we've all experienced something. So just allowing each other and ourselves to give grace to people when they are, maybe doing something that we don't agree with or doing something that may be offensive, really giving them grace and understanding that maybe that's a trauma response. Maybe it comes from trauma. And I think that's a good way for us to step into a conversation, a larger conversation about empathy, what it means to really step into someone else's shoes and not pity them and not just, stop at sympathy, because that's a totally different thing, but stepping into someone else's shoes and really for a moment feeling their pain and sharing in that experience, and then, navigating how to move forward after that. So, I just really promote trauma-informed care in everything. And, I talked a little bit ago about how I would love for us to, actively be proactive in being inclusive. For anyone who's ever worked with me or had any conversations with me about anything professional, you know that I'm extremely, extremely passionate about ensuring that, making language access available throughout Kern County, making that a common practice, that is one of my #1 priorities. And I think that is a good pathway to ensuring that, all voices are heard. And you can imagine in my line of work, if people are being harmed, people are enduring violence, how can they even speak up and ask for help if they're not given a mechanism to voice their concerns and to voice that, they're needing a way out of a dangerous situation. That's just very commonsensical to me, a very commonsensical approach for us to be more inclusive, to build that bridge with various communities. And so I guess, that in a larger context is really being proactive in finding out what are the barriers that marginalized communities are experiencing, and use that knowledge to inform all of the actions that we take on as organizations or institutions, and just making sure that those voices are amplified and are truly leading the work that we're doing. And I think those two tools will help us build a peaceful society.
Lauren, Pevin, Sandy, Antoinette, thank you for joining us today and for sharing your wisdom and personal experiences with us. We are so lucky to have the four of you leading us towards the direction of societal peace with your families, your children, and our community. I also want to thank the Bakersfield College staff members for your support in making this seminar a reality. Especially thank you to Earl Parson, Marbella Avalos, Kara McDonald, and Krista Moreland for your help in putting this seminar together. Last but not least, thank you so much to all the community members who joined this webinar and are part of Bakersfield College's BC Builds Bridges vision. Thank you for your time and participation. Have a good evening, and remember to share the hashtag BC Builds Bridges on your social media posts. Thank you so much.